coming up.
Now, the minister has said that user-generated content, in other words, the content put up by individuals, is exempt from the bill. However, the chair of the CRTC, Mr. Scott, has said, nope, in fact, it is captured by the bill. Obviously, there's a discrepancy here, which
I would say Madam Chair, and that was an interesting discussion, almost as if the Charter of Rights and Freedoms doesn't exist in our society, but had a very good discussion last night about what to do next, and there was a motion on the floor from Mr. Julian, and we didn't quite get to voting, and voting should only take about a minute.
Okay, then.
The shit's gonna hit the fan.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Sure. My first question here is going to go to Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg, I'm wondering if you can just talk to me a little bit about the work that you do on behalf of Canadian consumers and how Bill C-11 might impact them and your concerns around that.
Essentially, we're deeply concerned about this legislation because it could impede the ability of Canadians to hold the government accountable. And as an organization, we focus on less waste, lower taxes, and more affordable government. Unfortunately, this legislation sets a very dangerous precedent. It allows for this brand new regulatory machine that can filter content based on what it considers to be Canadian. But what we're all concerned about is the potential for that to expand into other areas in the future. It may not be phrased that now, but we have to worry about what governments might do in the future and what ground this lays for potential stretching as we go forward.
So sorry, just let's be really clear here then. When you're saying potential stretching that could take place with regard to how this bill is used in order to require that these different platforms curate content in a specific way according to whatever the government mandates through the CRTC, what are you potentially concerned about? I mean, today it looks innocent. It looks like it's just, you know, the propping up of Canadian content, even though it's an antiquated definition, and that certainly is harmful in and of itself. But nevertheless, beyond that, are there other concerns that you hold?
Absolutely. This legislation sets the stage for the government through the CRTC to be able to decide what ought to be promoted and what ought not to be promoted as we view products online. And so, yes, today the criteria might be Canadian, whether or not it's considered to be Canadian content, although I would note that some of the programming decisions are very outdated. A film called Gotta Love Trump is actually considered Canadian content, while The Handmaid's Tale is not. So there's a lot of problems there. But what I would also see is, yes, there could be expansion. Today, the government's talking about whether or not something is considered to be Canadian. We've heard Minister Mendicino talk about things like social cohesion. We know that online harms is coming down the pipeline. And so we're very concerned that this could create a mechanism through which the government could promote and demote certain certain content, what people are saying, based on standards that are not just Canadian and could go all the way to social cohesion, which is very vague and allows for a lot of room for the government to make decisions like that.
Bill C-11 is vague in some areas, and it will be left up to the CRTC to determine how they are going to apply the bill at large. And so without a policy directive, it is impossible for the CRTC to understand what the minister's intent is. Now, the minister is saying, well, that will come later, and he's asking Parliament to trust him as he requests that this legislation be moved forward. However, that seems out of step. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So as Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. If the government is trying to say we're going to create this legislation, we're going to pass it, and then we're going to figure out exactly what the orders are down the line, Canadians shouldn't have to trust that. We need proof of exactly what the government intends to do with this legislation. The regulations, the rules, the instructions should all be coming first. This is a very backward way of doing things in government, to pass a bill, to give all kinds of power to an organization that is rather unaccountable, and then just to presume that the minister, based on what the minister decides at a later date, will just simply make a determination. And because the power's already been given, Parliament has little way to stop it.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and that was an interesting discussion, almost as if the Charter of Rights and Freedoms doesn't exist in our society. But before I get to the witnesses, and I do want to make a quick apology to them, we had a very good discussion last night about what to do next, and there was a motion on the floor from Mr. Julian, and we didn't quite get to voting, and voting should only take about a minute.
Okay, then.
And I'll even cede my time. I have 6 minutes. I'm happy. This shouldn't take more than 6 minutes. I'm happy to cede that time back to the chair. But I'd like to put Mr. Julian's motion back on the floor.
Will you please respond to the question?
On a point of clarification, so Monsieur Shampoo can keep the floor, that yes, it would be on Monday that we would start clause by clause. This motion was approved by the committee. We debated it for an hour yesterday. The motion is before the committee. The motion is very simple. The motion is to set a deadline for clause by 4 p.m. And if Mr. Patzer wants to turn on the translation services to hear that in French, I'll say it again. The motion is to set a deadline for clause. Oh, he didn't put in his earpiece, Mr. Patzer. If you want to turn to the French channel.
This is debate. This is not a point of order.
This is a point
debate.
of order. This is what was discussed. The motion is valid. It doesn't need to be put back in
Chair,
writing.
I would appeal to
This is- Madam Chair,
your
there's a
orderly
point of
conduct
order
of
on a
this
point of
meeting.
order.
This is debate.
Order, please. Order, please. I'm not allowing debate across every party line in this thing. Let's get some order.
Madam Chair, it was not actually, a decision wasn't reached yesterday as to whether or not a copy of this motion would be provided in writing. There have been other instances at this committee where you have deemed it necessary to provide that.
There is no need, because the issue that we are discussing in the orders of business here is C11. The motion pertains to C11. There is no need to give 48 hours in both languages for this. When a motion is simple, and it is my understanding that this is a very simple one-sentence motion, there is, most people will understand what it is by now, because this is going to be the third time we're hearing this motion.
I would like to move an amendment.
It would seem that everyone has received it. And maybe in both official languages, it has been received. And perhaps, just for clarification, the clerk can read it once more before we rule on it.
So the full motion, including the sub-amendment, reads that the deadline for amendments be 3 days prior to clause by clause and after the committee has the opportunity to hear from the Minister of Canadian Heritage and department officials.
That seems to me, yes, somebody's raising a point of order before I even speak. Go ahead.
It's Rick Perkins. Just a point of order, Madam Chair. I believe.
Not your sub-amendment?
Yes, it is, but I believe we're beyond the allotted time, so I'm not sure if we can continue to deal with the your ruling on the amendment.
I will make that decision. All right. So
You need unanimous
Mr. Clerk,
consent,
go
I
ahead.
believe, to go beyond the 2 hours.
Mr. Perkins, I am speaking at the moment. Now, thank you. Did everybody get the sub-amendment that Mr. Perkins sent in both official languages? Yes. Would you like me to rule on it now, or will I entertain a motion to adjourn? Because we have to leave this room. Then I will move that the meeting be adjourned.